He was a powerful CEO feared in boardrooms across New York. But in his own home, his children flinched at the sound of his footsteps. They never laughed out loud. They never played without permission. And every nanny who had ever stepped into that mansion, gone within weeks, until one young woman struggling to survive the city's cruel reality knocked on the gate one rainy morning and stepped into a silence heavier than grief. She came for a job. But what she found behind those tall black gates was a house haunted not by ghosts but by sorrow. The man who hired her gave one rule: don't get close to my children. But what happens when broken hearts start to heal? When the smallest child clings to you in the dark and whispers, "Please don't leave. Stay with us," because what started as a job offer will turn into a battle for love. Trust in the soul of a shattered family. What secret is the cold-hearted billionaire hiding? And can one ordinary woman teach 3 children and their father how to feel again? Rain soaked the gray streets of Manhattan as Emma Cole tightened her thrift store jacket, her breath fogging in the chilly air. She had walked for hours soaked to the skin, and her worn sneakers squelched with every step. Her stomach had been empty for 2 days. Hope, once a flicker, was now barely a shadow. No one wanted to hire a college dropout with no experience. And definitely not someone who looked like she'd slept in the subway, which she had. Just when she was about to give up, her eyes landed on a flyer taped to a bus stop. Living. Nanny wanted high pay, no experience needed, immediate start. It seemed too good to be true. No name, no company, just a phone number and an Upper East Side address. Her fingers trembled as she sent a message to the number. "Hi, this is Emma. I saw your ad. I'm interested in the nanny job." A reply came instantly. "Be there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Don't be late." The next morning, Emma stood in front of a towering limestone mansion, tucked behind ivy-covered gates, feeling like a trespasser in a world that would never be hers. The security camera above the gate blinked once, then a voice crackled through the intercom named Emma Cole. "I'm here for the nanny position." The gate buzzed open. Inside, the estate was silent. The kind of silence that screamed money and something else, something she couldn't quite place. A tall woman in a black uniform met her at the entrance. "Mr. Weston is expecting you. Follow me." Mr. Alexander Weston, billionaire CEO of a major tech conglomerate, sat at the head of a long glass dining table, dressed sharply in a dark button-up and tailored slacks. He didn't smile when he looked at her. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You have experience with children?" "Not professionally, but I helped raise my younger brother," Emma replied, voice steady, despite the nerves. He studied her eyes, unreadable, then said something that sent a chill down her spine. "The last 3 nannies didn't last a week." Emma blinked. Why? His jaw clenched. "They weren't the right fit. My children require structure, discipline, and absolute silence when needed." She nodded, unsure what that meant. "You'll live here. Room and board included. You'll follow the schedule. No personal calls, no guests." "Understood." "Yes, sir." That night, in her assigned room, far too luxurious for someone like her, Emma stared at the ceiling. She couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't just accepted a job, but stepped into something much larger, something darker. The next morning, she met the children. There were 3 of them. Lucas, age 6, serious beyond his years. Bella, age 4, who never made eye contact. And Noah, only 2, who clutched a blanket so tightly it was fraying at the edges. None of them spoke. Breakfast was served in silence. The children sat rigidly in their seats, chewing slowly, never glancing at their father at the head of the table. Emma tried to make conversation, but each word felt like it fractured the atmosphere. When Noah dropped his spoon, Lucas instantly picked it up, his hands trembling slightly as he placed it back on his brother's tray. Weston didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge them. Emma watched. Heart twisting. These weren't just quiet kids. These were kids who had learned fear. Later that day, while playing blocks with Noah, she whispered softly, "Do you like colors?" He didn't reply, but for the first time, his lips curled slightly. Progress! Until she heard the footsteps behind her. Miss Cole? Weston's voice was calm, but there was a hard edge in it. This isn't playtime. Keep them on schedule. Emma stood. They're children. They need you are not here to parent. Just to keep them safe. Safe from what she asked before she could stop herself. A pause. That's not your concern. That night, she dreamed of doors that wouldn't open and children crying behind walls. When she woke, her hands were clenched into fists. She knew one thing. These children were not okay, and neither was this house. But she wasn't leaving. Not yet. The days passed slowly inside the western estate, and the deeper Emma stepped into the rhythms of the house, the more she realized it wasn't the silence that unsettled her. It was the restraint. Everything here was controlled, precise, measured. The children never laughed, never ran through the halls. Lucas, the oldest, always kept his back straight and his voice low. Bella flinched when the wind rattled the windows. And little Noah, he barely spoke at all. Emma tried everything to warm them up. She sang softly while folding laundry, left storybooks open near their toys, even baked cookies with Busby, the head housekeeper, just to fill the kitchen with a normal smell. But the kids remained distant, like they were waiting for a cue she didn't understand. One afternoon, Emma noticed Bella crouched in the hallway by a locked door. The little girl glanced up, startled as if caught committing a crime. "What's behind there?" Emma asked gently. Bella didn't answer. She only whispered, "That was Mommy's room," before running off without another word. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood outside the door Bella had pointed to, wondering what kind of woman had once lived behind it. Mrs. Weston wasn't mentioned in the house. No photos, no belongings, no memories. Just that one room locked. The next morning, Alexander Weston called Emma into his office. He didn't look up when she entered, simply gestured for her to sit. "You've lasted longer than the others," he said without emotion. Emma nodded, unsure how to respond. Then he looked at her, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something regret, anger. She couldn't tell. "I need you to understand something, Miss Cole," he said, voice steady. "This house isn't a home. It's a fortress. My children live under my rules because this world isn't kind, and it doesn't care if they cry." Emma's heart ached. "But you're not protecting them from the world," she said softly. "You're teaching them to be afraid of it." His jaw tightened. "That's enough. You're here to do a job, not to question how I raised my family." But Emma couldn't let it go. That night after dinner, she found Lucas sitting on the floor in the hallway, clutching a torn page from a book. She knelt beside him. "What's this?" she asked. Lucas looked down. "It was Mommy's favorite story," he whispered, but Dad threw the book away. Emma's stomach turned. "Do you miss her?" He nodded once. "She used to sing." The house wasn't quiet then. Emma tucked the page into her pocket. Later, while helping Noah brush his teeth, he suddenly turned and whispered, "Are you going to leave, too?" The question pierced her like a blade. "No," she said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." But even as she said it, she wondered if she was making a promise she couldn't keep. The next morning, the household woke to the sound of Noah crying uncontrollably. Emma rushed to his room and found him curled in bed, clutching his chest. He couldn't breathe. She shouted for help, and within minutes, Weston was there, shocked, speechless. A doctor was called. They said it was a panic attack brought on by emotional stress. Alexander Weston stood by the window as the doctor left. Unmoving. Emma approached him. "Your son had a panic attack," she said carefully, "because he's terrified of losing someone again." "Don't tell me how to parent," he snapped. "I'm not. I'm telling you what you already know." The man turned, then his eyes unreadable. "Get some rest, Miss Cole." But she couldn't rest. That night, she found Bella asleep in her bed, fingers curled around an old bracelet. It was cheap plastic, bright pink, The kind of thing a child would never choose to keep unless it meant something. Emma sat by her bedside until morning. And then something changed. Lucas came to her the next day and said, "I want to show you something." He led her quietly into the old greenhouse behind the estate, long forgotten and overgrown. Inside, in the center of the dusty glass house, was a small table with scattered drawings. Crayon sketches of a woman holding hands with 3 children. "My mom used to paint here," he whispered. "Dad never comes back here." Emma looked at the art. In every picture, the children were smiling. And in each one, the father was missing. That evening, Weston returned home earlier than usual. He found Emma and the children sitting around a book, laughing softly as Bella mispronounced the word whimsical. For a split second, his expression softened. But when their eyes met, the warmth vanished. "I need to speak with you," he said. Emma followed him to the study. "I think it's time for you to go," he said flatly. She stared at him, stunned. "What?" "You've overstepped. My children don't need confusion or attachments that will vanish like all the others." Emma swallowed hard. "But what if they don't vanish?" He turned away. "I'm doing what's best for them," he said. Emma left the room with her heart hammering. That night, she packed a small bag. But as she reached the staircase, she heard a voice behind her. "Please don't leave." It was Lucas. Bella stood behind him, holding Noah's hand. "You make the house feel safe," she said. Emma blinked away tears. "I want to stay, but your father." "We Uncle talk to him," Lucas said. Emma didn't know what to say. And then came the sound of slow footsteps descending the stairs. It was Weston. He looked at the 3 children in front of Emma, his children, and something changed in his face. Not much, just enough. He looked at Emma, then said simply, "Stay," and walked away. The kids turned to her, hopeful. For the first time, she believed there might be a way to rebuild something inside that cold, broken mansion. Maybe this was never about just keeping them safe. Maybe it was about teaching them how to feel again. The days after Emma was told to stay didn't feel like victory. They felt like walking a tightrope. Alexander Weston said little, but watched everything. The children tiptoed around their own joy as if afraid it would be stolen if they reached for too much of it. Emma, meanwhile, tried to create islands of peace in a sea of tension, board games after homework, bedtime stories. Soft lullabies that lingered in the hallway long after the lights went out. But something in the house had shifted. One morning, Emma woke to find a single envelope slid under her door. No name. Just a folded note inside. It was a drawing crayon on notebook paper. It was a picture of the 4 of them, Lucas, Bella, and Emma, standing under a tree, all smiling. It was signed in shaky handwriting from Bella. Emma blinked back tears. That day, she packed the drawing carefully between the pages of her journal. No matter what happened, she would carry it with her always. That evening, Weston returned from the office early. It was raining hard, the kind of storm that turned the city gray and closed in the world like a curtain. But something was off. He was soaked, his hair uncombed, his tie missing. The man who always seemed made of stone now looked cracked. "Is everything all right?" Emma asked. He looked at her as though he wanted to say something, but couldn't. Instead, he walked into his office and closed the door. Hours passed. The thunder rolled above the house like an omen, and then screaming. It was Bella. Emma dropped the book she'd been reading and raced upstairs. She found Bella in Noah's room, trembling, eyes wide. "Daddy's yelling?" she cried. "I heard him yelling at someone on the phone." Emma wrapped her arms around her. Just as Lucas appeared in the doorway. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. "I think he's scared." That night, Emma waited. She stood outside the office door, unsure whether to knock or to walk away. The silence inside pressed against her like a weight. Finally, she knocked. "Come in," came the voice, tired, low. Weston was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at a half-empty glass of whiskey. His hand trembled slightly as he set it down. "They're trying to take the company," he said. Emma stepped in slowly. "Who is my partner? Someone I trusted for years, and now he's turning the board against me. They're saying I'm distracted, that I've lost control." Emma hesitated. "And have you?" He looked up at her eyes sharp, but not angry. "Honest." "Yes," he said. He leaned back in the chair as if defeated by the confession. "When my wife died, I promised myself I'd never let anyone close again. I thought if I controlled everything, I could protect what was left." Emma spoke softly. "But you've been pushing away the only people who could help you heal." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "I don't know how to be anything else," he whispered. Emma took a breath, walked to the bookshelf, picked up a framed photo tucked behind old business awards. It was dusty, but there she was, a woman with bright eyes holding baby Noah on her lap. "Maybe you don't have to be anything else," she said. "Maybe you just have to start from where you are." For the first time, Alexander Weston looked like a man on the verge of finally letting go of his ghosts. The next few weeks changed everything. Weston didn't transform overnight, but he showed up more. He started eating meals with the kids, even helping Lucas with his science project. One afternoon, he surprised everyone by taking them all to the park. For the first time, they saw him laugh. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The children bloomed. Noah started talking in full sentences. Bella drew again. Lucas smiled more often. The Weston house no longer felt like a prison. And Emma felt something shift in herself, too. One night, as she read to the kids on the couch, she looked up to find Weston watching from the hallway. He didn't interrupt, just watched, then turned away with a quiet smile. But there was still one door that hadn't been opened, their mother's room. Until one morning, Weston knocked on Emma's door. She opened it to find him standing there holding a key. "I think it's time," he said. They walked together to the locked room. Weston unlocked the door and stepped aside. The air inside was still. Time hadn't touched it. Makeup still lined the vanity. A faded perfume bottle sat on the windowsill. A half-read book rested on the nightstand. "This was her world," he said, voice barely a whisper. Emma didn't speak. She just placed her hand gently over his. "You don't have to forget her to move forward," she said. He nodded slowly. "I know that now." Later that evening, Emma sat with the kids, helping them write letters for school. Lucas paused and looked at her. "If you had the choice to go or stay forever," he asked, "what would you choose?" Emma smiled. "I'd stay," she said without a doubt. The kids erupted in cheers, throwing their arms around her. And at that exact moment, Weston stepped into the room. "We have one more surprise," he said. He held up an envelope. "Your contract was up last week, but if you'll have us..." He looked at the kids, then back at Emma. "We'd like to make this permanent." Emma stood there stunned, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that," she said, her voice breaking. That weekend, they celebrated in the garden. Balloons, cake, music, real music this time. Weston gave a short speech. Short but meaningful. "This house was once filled with silence," he said, "but she brought it back to life. Emma, thank you for reminding us what family is." Emma's eyes welled as the children hugged her. And in that golden New York afternoon light, the Western family, damaged, healing, imperfect, finally felt whole. So tell us, how did this story make you feel? Do you believe people can truly change? Would you have stayed in Emma's shoes? Drop a 100 in the comments if this story touched your heart. And don't forget to tell us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Share this video if you believe that even the coldest hearts can learn to love.